Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another review video here on the channel. Today we are going to be talking about The Principle of Moments. Some quick disclaimers before we start. I had a digital review copy of this book sent to me for free from the publisher. Regardless of where books come from, nobody's paying me to talk about books except my patrons, and all opinions are my own. I will keep this as spoiler free as humanly possible. I am going to be talking about the book as a whole. If you want to go in knowing absolutely nothing, pause the video, come back when you've read it, we'll talk then, and I'll link the story graph for the book down below in case you want to check out any user-generated content warnings. Principle of Moments came out on the 18th of January 2024. Sorry, this review's a little bit late. It is a fantastic space opera time travel story featuring huge themes around destiny and prophecy and all of that good stuff from debut author Esmie Jikiemi-Pearson, the Future Worlds Prize winner in 2024, and she is the co-founder of Impact of a Mission, which is a campaign trying to get Black history taught in schools as part of the curriculum. I'm going to read you a little snippet of the blurb just to give you flavour. Century-spanning space fantasy novel that will take you on a whirlwind adventure, from a Regency-era love affair between a time traveller and the prince waiting for him in the past, to a rescue mission in the 60th century, where a girl desperately races against time as she searches for the sister the Emperor stole. It's a huge, expansive book that comes with a lot of positives, obviously. If you like space opera things, but maybe you're more of a fantasy reader than a science fiction reader, this might be for you, because that time travel historic element brings a lot of that fantasy in. It also very much, I think something about the way it does Empire feels very fantastical to me, in the sense of hearkening to fantasy world building. It is very much still a sci-fi, but I think we all know that there's often some parallels between the two. There's a reason they are shelved together in bookshops. I think one of the main benefits of the fact that it's so broad and expansive is there is a little bit of something for everybody. I think there's a lot that different people could take from this book and enjoy. There's a real sense of scope for where the series could go in the future. It could go in so many different directions. One of the things I particularly love about a space opera is that sense that you're seeing one story in a huge world. I think especially space opera, where space is so vast, it feels like you should just be looking at kind of tiny pinpricks within that, though there is this overarching theme of destiny and prophecy that makes everything feel much more high stakes. We follow two point of view characters basically for the whole thing. I do think there will be more in future books, just a hunch. Obi and Asha are our main characters. They are both interesting in very different ways. We have Obi, who's a kind of seasoned time traveller. He is the one in the love affair with the prince. Asha, who is sort of not fish out of water, because she's very confident and she knows what she's doing, but very, I suppose, naive in comparison, and she's very fresh to being free because she has not been free for a very long time. I liked both of them. I thought they were really interesting characters. I think writing a character like Asha, where she is incredibly smart, she's very practical, she's very pragmatic, but she does have these gaps in her knowledge, was very interesting. And likewise, I liked how Obi had kind of, in some ways, some emotional gaps, and we understood why those were happening. Two very, very interesting characters. I liked seeing the world through their eyes. I think for me, there was a real sense that when they came together, the plot started to accelerate, which was really exciting, and I hope deliberate as part of the kind of framework of the book. I really enjoyed getting to see their dynamic, and I'm interested to see where character stuff goes in the future, because there are some other characters who I would love to know more about. My overwhelming feeling finishing this book was it's one that I won't necessarily, at least not from a first read, I've only read it once, I won't necessarily remember every single plot point that happened. Like, if I was planning on reading the sequel, which I probably will, spoilers, I would definitely want to do a reread, and I'd quite like to do an audiobook reread. It's just that kind of story. So the overall plot is not super memorable to me personally. What I will remember is key moments and key scenes within the story. I think that's something to do with how the writing is very visual, at least I felt that way. I could definitely envision a lot of these particular scenes. I think especially the time travel aspects, but that might just be my history nerd coming through. There's some really brave moments within that. In terms of the topics and political situations, anytime an author picks up time travel, it's always a little bit of a brave thing, especially if you're looking backwards in time, because obviously you get into historical accuracy and you get into lots of different questions. This doesn't get bogged down in those things, but there is for sure a sense of wanting to talk about realities that are in history during that time period, while also introducing that as part of this wider space opera. It's very interesting, lots of disparate parts, but I liked it. It's a standout book in terms of those individual moments. I've had many other series that I've had that with. I think I tend to be a very scene-focused individual, rather than having an encyclopedic knowledge of plot and what happens in things. I remember individual things that happened in things, but in this case, it was very enjoyable. I think the flip side of that is that in a lot of ways, particularly this first book. I think because there is so much to set up, we are looking at such a huge expanse of not only the universe but also of time. There is so much has to be set up that it feels a little bit shallow. Not saying the issues that the book is getting into are shallow, but overall the sense is I have learned a lot and there's a lot of different things I could dig more into. And I think that is purely this is the first book in a fairly epic series, and also a little bit just kind of the nature of the genre. I think definitely a book that will require a reread for full absorption. This isn't being marketed as young adult, but I think the cover hints at kind of a young adult crossover that I do think is there. I do think young adult readers could enjoy this. I will say to check out the content warnings because not all of it is everything that would be appropriate to find in a young adult book, shall we say. So yeah, it's YA-ish, but it's not a YA book. I think overall my main criticisms, quote unquote, with this story is that it's a book one, and it's really tricky after a book one to make a kind of flat judgment for a series as a whole. I think book two is really going to make or break this for me, whether we get deeper into the weeds with some of the issues, whether we learn more about these characters. I genuinely could not tell you where it's going to go, and I do remember how it ended. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what comes next. But if you're a person like me where you don't read an awful lot of science fiction, I read some, just not oodles, and you want a really cool space opera that's doing a lot of very interesting things, I would say definitely keep an eye out for this one. In the book, Esmie Jikiemi-Pearson talks about owing a debt to Octavia Butler in terms of being a Black author writing science fiction, and I do think it's well worth checking out Octavia Butler's stuff if you haven't already. I have a recent review video up that I will link if I remember. Other things this book has been compared to, it's been compared to some V.E. Schwab, which I don't disagree with. I think primarily the kind of Addie LaRue side of it as opposed to the more action-focused books. Perhaps. Likewise, The Blood Trials is another one I've seen people compare it to, and I would semi-agree. I think The Blood Trials is a little bit leaning more YA, and this does a little bit more interesting stuff, but I did enjoy The Blood Trials pretty much. And I'm always going to recommend Becky Chambers. If we want to talk about interesting space things, I'm always going to recommend Becky Chambers. It's very different from this book, but any chance at all. Should you read The Principle of Moments? I would say yes. It wasn't my favourite science fiction, it didn't totally grab me, but I definitely had the sense that there's a lot of momentum behind this, and I think it's going to be a really solid series overall. The main thing that happened in this book is it's so vast, it's huge, and as I say, space and time, there's a lot to set up, and I think without needing to do so much setup in book two and get into the action earlier, it will be very good. And I think it'll be one of those series where when you read it all as a whole and you can read the books running into one another, that pacing and that setup feels a bit less clunky. Well, not even clunky, less of a drag perhaps. It definitely felt like a slow build at the start of the book. Have you read The Principle of Moments? Do you have plans to? Let me know down in the comments below. While you're commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say an enormous thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams, and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much to you for watching. That's all from me, and I will see you in the next one.
There's gonna be some bloopers now.
And she's the co-founder of Impact for Emission? Of Emission. That makes more sense. Why are you vibrating at me?